Hi there. Welcome to Cargo Film Presents. My name is Dave.
And I'm Dan.
On Cargo Film Presents, we talk documentary films. Documentary films we tend to recommend for the most part, with a couple of exceptions. And this week we'll be talking about the film Collective.
Cum e posibil ca oameni care au ieșit de acolo să moară după 12 zile?
Deci, practic, ei au ascuns lucrurile astea, da? Dacă nu spunem lucrurilor pe nume, suntem complici.
This is being recorded one day after the Academy Awards, so we know that Collective did not win the Academy Award. However, yeah, unfortunately, not to say that it was my personal pick, but definitely needed to be on the list of nominees. I should say that. It's a film directed by Alexander Nanau. Collective follows a heroic team of journalists as they uncover shocking widespread corruption after a deadly nightclub fire, the mysterious death of the owner of a powerful pharmaceutical firm, and the quiet resignation of a health minister, seemingly unrelated events, all within weeks of each other. The team of intrepid reporters exposes a much larger, much more explosive political scandal. Collective is a fast-paced, real-time investigative story about getting at the truth and the value and limits of an independent press. What do you think, Dan?
Well, I'm just going to say first that, you might be wondering why we're not talking about The Octopus Teacher, since it did win Best Documentary last night, but we did speak about The Octopus Teacher. So if you want to hear about that, then you can go and find that episode in Cargo Film Presents. But as for Collective,
that last summer.
Right. And but as for Collective, I'm going to do something I don't like to do, which is compare it to something else and compare it to fiction. And even worse is compare it to American fiction. Is that it's like part newsroom drama, right? Which is like if you're into the kind of All the President's Men kind of film, watching journalists, do their job incredibly, digging into the truth. Then this is for you, although it's certainly less glamorous than maybe All the President's Men, but nonetheless, the kind of dogged heroism of Catalin Talenton and his team is remarkable. And then it's also got this like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington aspect of it, which is that, you see Vlad, and I'll probably butcher his last name.
Let's just call him Vlad.
Vlad, who is appointed the Minister of Health after the collective fire and resignations of politicians. He is a patients' right activist, I think is his background. And he's sort of put into the position of Minister of Health to placate and please, the protesters and the public. But yet he tries to himself reform the system from the inside. And there's also remarkable access to his efforts in attempting to do that. As he faces obstacle after obstacle to try and get this done. And you just see, from both sides, just how unbelievably corrupt, this system, the healthcare system is in Romania, to the point where it's just totally exasperating and devastating.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. My if I had a one-word review of this film, and I had to think long and hard about what that word would be, and that would be wow. It's easily one of the most soul-crushing viewing experiences I've had, in this past year. It's as engaging as any kind of Hollywood production, minus the car chases and fight scenes and explosions every 12 minutes. But there are real heroes in this story, and there are real villains. And the film is notable to me that it doesn't have any music, at least until the last scene. And of course, during the harrowing footage you see of the collective club catching on fire. And maybe that's because I watch too many American movies in general. I like, music kind of emphasizing and underlining and punctuating and stuff. But whatever, it's not a criticism, not far from it. And it also should be noted that it's purely observational. There are no interviews set up for the filmmaking team, and which I loved both of those elements. They worked very well. It kind of creates this kind of high wire act for the filmmaking team to be able to kind of keep the narrative going based on the footage that they're getting. And and it makes it feel like you're watching a narrative film. So I understand those narrative film comparisons. You feel like you're a fly on the wall. But for a film that kind of exposes government corruption, abuse, dysfunction of a country's healthcare system, on paper it reads very dull. It's kind of like, hey, honey, do you want to watch that doc on the Romanian healthcare system tonight? It sounds dull, but it's the opposite of dull. It's riveting, and as you said, infuriating to watch.
I must say, I'm glad we watched this one. Kind of, we're not out of the woods yet with the pandemic, but I'm glad we watched it now instead of before going into the pandemic. Because
True.
Yeah, it really is. It really is a horror story, not only for Romania, but obviously it's universal in the sense that we've seen a lot of populist swings in governments, faux populist swings throughout Europe and also in the United States, where important positions like directors of hospitals, managers of hospitals, or whatever become, political patronages. And this is where you just see, systems and institutions fall apart, where you have highly incompetent people who are, mostly interested in lining their own pockets and their own self-interest. And I think that's partly what, watching this was so just gutting, was that to see the indifference really to people suffering, people who are at their most vulnerable, people who are in the healthcare system, and just the fact that these government bureaucrats do not care at all. I mean, that's what's just because we've seen lots of documentaries about people doing horrible things, but just the cynicism and indifference to suffering. As we're sort of going through and coming out of a pandemic, I think that's what is probably the power of this film, and why it has resonated so widely beyond being just a Romanian story, as we've said, a film about the Romanian healthcare system.
Right, but still, I wonder what the filmmakers did kind of more intently that makes this film work so well. I mean, clearly, if they hadn't been permitted access, especially to Vlad, the new health minister, and his attempts at government transparency and fixing the system, that shift in the story is kind of crucial, because it adds this other layer and depth and additional narrative, to the story. It kind of lets you in on the other side of that story, the political and legal challenges that you hinted at earlier. And that the reporters were only speculating about in the first half of the film. And I think without Vlad, the film could have still been very interesting. But I think that access, and the fact that he's this really profoundly decent guy too, trying to do the right thing, kind of makes the film work better as a whole. The other thing I thought about that maybe it makes it work so well is how the filmmaking team kind of dilutes the raw essential plot points. I think they have the luxury of doing that because there's so many incredible plot points, but it has it adheres to this kind of investigative thriller model, and they're not about going to go into like discussions about policy and political discussions too much, although that's referenced, but not in too much detail. It's really all about using those plot points to advance the plot, right?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. I mean, and you're right. They were blessed. Well, unfortunately,
really blessed.
People who,
unfortunately for the people, yes, no doubt.
But yeah, it just keeps sinking. Like there's a moment, 15 minutes or 20 minutes into the film, where I think the journalist Tolontan, after after they test some of the disinfectants that were used in the hospital, and they
Mhm.
discover that they've been diluted by 10 times. And,
Yeah.
he says to the other journalists, like, we've got it. Like, this is it. Like,
Yeah.
and at that point you're like, well, like, where's the story going to go? Right. Like,
That's
they've
right. That's
obviously
right.
nailed the
Yeah.
pharmaceutical
Yeah. Yeah.
company, and you're like, oh, okay, story's over. And then, yeah, it just, it just starts
It's
sinking.
relentless.
Relentless. Yeah. This
Yeah.
the corruption.
Right.
And as you said, that just that the story does take that next that in the next move and that next level where you get the insider access to a minister trying to change the government from within, and
Mhm.
having essentially his legs cut out from under him.
Yeah.
Politicians start attacking him and
Yeah.
saying that he is corrupt, and certain tactics we have seen in the political arena over the past few years. I thought it was also really interesting, and not that it's used in any sort of comedic way, but that the journalists who are able to break this story and
Mhm.
continue to follow the story was a sports newspaper, which is quite.
Yeah. They didn't address that in the film, and it seemed unusual. Perhaps this sports gazette or whatever it's called does have a kind of a current affairs investigative section, because they seemed like seasoned investigative reporters. But yeah, we don't know, because it's not mentioned in the film at all.
Yeah, I was curious. I looked it up just afterwards. I was like, oh wow, it's and I guess they had investigated sports corruption. So they were some
Aha.
really good, investigative reporters, and had brought
Well, there
down
you
a
go.
minister or someone, important in the sports world. And so they had kind of transferred that to
Yeah.
this, health crisis
Right. Right. Makes
afterwards. And
sense.
so that was like, oh, okay, now that.
Good digging there, Dan. Good digging. Good stuff.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple of scenes there that you liked, or a scene that you liked. I was thinking, I noted in my head a couple of others that kind of stood out when towards the end now, when Vlad is, it's after he loses the election and he's talking to his dad on the phone. And this is an election, like I think it was 2015, 2016, around
Yeah.
there. Anyway, it kind of encapsulates or I should say his dad, encapsulates and unleashes kind of his profound disbelief kind of at the cultural divide, that exists in the country, that what the Canadians will call, two solitudes, and how far, like, as you mentioned earlier, how far democracies around the world have veered off course in recent years. And I was just sitting there watching that scene and saying, man, yeah, absolutely. We feel your pain, man. We feel your pain. And there was another one, the photo shoot, of course, of one of the burn victims. Actually, it was a couple of sequences kind of back to back. I mean, not back to back, but they had they showed one of the burn victims being photographed. And then, but what was more impactful to me was the exhibition of the photos,
Yeah.
and showing the reactions of people seeing these photos, and also then, she was being interviewed after the, at that exhibit, and the incredulous reporters asking her why she wasn't angry at the government. I don't know. It just beautifully allowed the viewer an opportunity to kind of channel both the sympathy and the rage, in one fell swoop, so I thought it was just nicely effective in that respect.
Yeah. Those were powerful scenes. I did also, I did like the moment where one of the doctors. We should also say that the whistleblowers in this film are
Right.
incredibly courageous, coming forward. We all know what can happen to whistleblowers, and
and to be filmed as well. I mean, they were being filmed. I was like, wow, they agreed to do that, and that was amazing. Yeah.
And there's the one doctor who shares footage of one of the burn patients who subsequently dies with maggots.
Just awful.
In her head, which was just
horrific. Horrific.
That was just a tough scene. But then,
tough scene.
The journalist, I believe it's Catalin, asks her, why is this why is this sort of happening? Like, what is going on? And
Right.
she quotes her mother, who says, they no longer think we're human.
Right.
That really just kind of
Yeah.
hit me. So that one, and then there's a great scene, slightly in a more again, not really comedic, but there's the moment where Vlad is on the phone with the National Transplant Agency, and he's stopped transplants from continuing to take place in Romania until they sort out the accreditation system for hospital managers. And
Right.
so I believe it's the current mayor at the time, says that her hospital is accredited, and she's calling on him to reopen the transplant center.
Right.
And, Vlad is talking to the head of the transplant agency, and he's saying, well, I've been told you were forced, you're not really an accredited hospital, but, the ministers had forced this through. And the guy's like, well, yes, that's right. But don't go public with this. And Vlad's like, well, it's true. He's
Right.
like to the guy,
Exactly.
he's like, please don't go public with this. And you're just like, oh goodness, just the depth of the corruption and mismanagement is epic, levels of epic proportion.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's those moments like that just really throughout the film. It doesn't go a couple of minutes with moments resembling that. I read a couple of things, that kind of point to like the faintest of optimism that exists in this film. And you were talking about, some fictional references, and I didn't see any optimism in this story at all, even with these heroes, because it all kind of ends up kind of depressing. Vlad, who's this decent person, is voted out of office, and so it's like business as usual as far as the government is concerned. The reporters are threatened by government intelligence. All right. That's not good. That's the way that their story ends. So Chinatown is a movie. It makes that feeling of hopelessness you feel at the end of Chinatown, and that's okay. For a movie like this, it's just couldn't have ended in a Hollywood typical Hollywood ending. Optimistic way. It just would not work for this film.
No, I didn't see much, hope or optimism by the end of it. I suppose I saw something the director was saying that there was more whistleblowers were coming forward. I mean, so obviously just the actions of the journalists in the film and Vlad, give you some faith and hope that there are decent people who are, trying to hold power accountable and do the right thing.
Sure. But what we really want to hear is that they are being held accountable and things change. That's the happy ending of the story we're all looking for, right?
Yeah. I did see that Vlad was, I think
he was reappointed
as the Minister of Health.
Yeah, he was reappointed. That's right. I saw that too. Oh, he did get fired again. Well, he was reappointed during COVID. I mean, talk about going from, one crap storm to another.
Right. And I think he was fired for no reason, I think I read. So
right.
I guess not much. Not enough has changed yet.
Not enough has changed.
I would definitely check this movie out. It didn't remind me of a film I saw. I haven't seen that much Romanian cinema, and perhaps we should all watch more if we can stomach it.
Indeed, there is a bit of a Romanian wave, isn't there?
There is, yeah. I saw The Death of Mr. Lazarosco, which is a Christian Puyi film. Again,
right.
Correct translation of his last name, but that was like a film I think made a few years ago about a guy, spending his last hours in hospitals and getting shuffled around from doctor to doctor, and all saying they couldn't help him.
Right.
I remember seeing that, and it was, it was kind of had this humorous comedic, but it was very dark. It just feels like every film that I've watched about Romania is about the healthcare system and how dysfunctional it is.
Would you recommend that film?
I would recommend it. It's, it's not a completely easy watch. It has this sort of slow cinema style to it. But then there was that other Romanian film that won, I think, the Palme d'Or quite a while back, about abortion and the healthcare system. Again, a sort of slice of social realism with a kind of Romanian twist. But yeah.
I mean, listen, these filmmakers, artists are reflecting society as they see it. Certainly part of the serious growing pains of a rather newish democracy trying to get it right, but also a country that probably isn't does not have the economic might of a Germany or France and so on, and there's you feel for them for sure. You really feel for them. All right, well, listen, thanks for checking this episode out. We do recommend Collective, really one of the better documentaries of 2020. Really great film. You will not be disappointed. So thanks for checking us out. See you later, Dan.
See you next time.
În momentul în care presa ajunge să facă reverențe autoritățile se vor purta rău cu oameni, cu cetățeni. Întotdeauna se întâmplă asta, pretutindeni în lume, s-a întâmplat și în cazul nostru.